Hello everybody and welcome back to the Import Export Hub channel. I hope that you are all doing great. Bogdan here, your host for the next couple of minutes with another video dedicated to a specific product, and this time I'm going to cover the imports and the exports for walnuts. For 2020, I will show you the largest importers and exporters, both for in-shell and shelled walnuts. Again, for the figures concerning 2020, I will show you also the trading partners for the United States exports, the major export gateways in the United States, and finally we will see together a couple of tables from FAOSTAT about production, yield, and the area harvested in the major export countries. So guys, with this being said, let's dive into the Excel file here that I've prepared already. And I will start with the biggest exporters for 2020 for in-shell walnuts. And we see here clearly the United States leading the way with some $416 million worth of exports, followed at some distance by Chile, and on the third spot we have China with almost $169.5 million. But of course that there are other big exporters in this top 10 list, like, I don't know, Mexico, France, or Argentina, for example, just to name a few. And guys, overall the exports amounted to some $1.2 billion, unfortunately shrinking quite a lot in terms of exported value compared with the previous year, so 2019, almost a quarter. And basically we have more or less the same exported value as we did in 2017 or 2018. As for the year-on-year change, except here Australia, who exported with 24% more than in 2019, the rest of the top 10 exporters had their values considerably reduced, with Mexico having the biggest contraction both in absolute and relative terms. And now moving to the biggest exporters of shelled walnuts, here it strikes me how relatively stable the exported values were from 2017 until 2020. So the last year, and we see here again the United States leading the way with some $832 million worth of exports, followed by Mexico with $494 million, and we have on the third spot Chile with some $207 million worth of exports for 2020. Other big exporters of shelled walnuts are Germany, we have Ukraine, Turkey, or Romania, but let's face it, none of them getting close to the exported values of Chile or Mexico, not to mention the United States. In terms of year-on-year change, the overall exports shrunk insignificantly in relative terms, so some 0.5%. And except the United States, Germany, Turkey, and also Romania here, who all registered bigger exported values, for the rest of them we have lower values. The biggest hit registered again by Mexico, which in absolute terms saw its exported values decrease with some $65 million. On the other hand, the biggest increase, again considering the absolute values, was registered by the United States, who saw its exports increase with almost $77 million. And now guys, with the exports being covered, I will now move on to the import side, and I will begin with the biggest importers of walnuts in shell. And we see that overall the imported value for 2020 was around $921 million, with Mexico, Turkey, and Italy being the biggest importers. But of course there are other big importers like the United Arab Emirates, India here, also Morocco or Vietnam, just to name a few from this top 10 list. And relative to the trend, well, from 2014 until 2020, we see a couple of countries who increased their imported value. And from my point of view, the most important ones are India, Morocco or Iraq also, and Vietnam, as these are also a couple of countries that experienced growth relative to the 2019 figures. The biggest absolute positive change happening in relation with India, who imported with some $19 million more. On the other side of the spectrum, if you want, the biggest drop in absolute terms again was in relation with the United Arab Emirates, who in 2020 imported with almost $50 million less than it did in 2019. And now, with the biggest importers of in-shell walnuts being also covered, I will move on to the biggest importers of shelled walnuts. And here we see that for 2020, the cumulative imported value amounted to some $1.74 billion, which is 10% more in relative terms than what happened in 2019. With Germany here, Japan and Spain driving most of the world demand. Of course, there are other important importers in this top 10 list, and I will name here just a few. And we're having Canada, the United Kingdom, or South Korea, all of them with really impressive figures, if you ask me. And in terms of trend, the only countries having a real strong growth are Germany and the United Arab Emirates, while for the others we either have a downward trend or some big volatility year on year, as in the case with Canada, Japan, or Spain, for example. And again, in relation to the year-on-year changes, as I've said, there was a 10% positive change. And except Italy, who had some 6% drop in the imported values, with the rest of them we have positive changes ranging from, I don't know, 1% to some 23, 24%, as in the case with Germany, who seems to have also the biggest positive absolute change of about $60 million. And guys, with this being also covered, I will now move on to my next sheet, in which I will try to cover the exports of the United States for shelled walnuts in 2020. In order to see together who are the main trading partners. And I have here the figures for the top 15 ones, and we see how Germany makes up for almost 21% of all the imports, followed by Japan, and then on the third place we have South Korea with some 10% share in the United States exports in terms of value. Relative to the quantity exported, we have some 130,000 tons exported by the United States in 2020. And for the most of the countries, the value and the quantity exported are going hand in hand, so to say, except for a couple of cases here in which, for a lesser amount of money, some countries manage to import a greater volume of shelled walnuts. The first example is related to Italy and India, and the second one is related to Saudi Arabia and Mexico. And basically here I don't want to underline the fact that, I don't know, some traders are better than others, but rather to give you a possible explanation regarding the quality of the walnuts, as let's face it, there is one price for whole or halves walnuts, and of course there is another one for quarters or broken ones. So my guess is that this is the reason why, I don't know, India and Saudi Arabia imported more quantity for less amount of money, and we can discount the distance factor, as the amount of dollars expressed here is related to the Incoterms used when exporting. So we either have FAS or FCA, and the difference is quite negligible if we consider Mexico and Saudi Arabia, for example, and most probably India and Indian importers from Saudi Arabia are importing lower quality walnuts. Now moving on on the growth in the exported value between 2016 and 2020. Germany, Canada, India, and Mexico had the biggest growth, while on the other side of the table we have negative changes in these last 5 years in relation with South Korea. We have also Spain, Israel, Australia, and the last one, Saudi Arabia. As for the average tariff faced by the US exports, the biggest one is with India, and we have some 30% tariff. We have 5.1% for the countries in the European Union, or zero tariff for Canada and Mexico, both members of NAFTA 2.0, or again 0% for Israel, Australia, and Korea. But these countries are having bilateral free trade agreements with the United States, so we have here 0% tariff. And now with the US exports for 2020 being covered, I will move on to the US export gateways. I have prepared this table, this time with data coming from 2021, so relatively new, for in-shell walnuts exports. And here it is no surprise really to see that the major export gateway is California, which is highlighted here in yellow, home to the US walnut growing zone, benefiting immensely from the proximity of Los Angeles Long Beach ports for the shipments by sea, or the relative proximity of Laredo and El Paso for in Texas for the exports via truck towards Mexico. In terms of the trade activity, if you like, the months with the biggest volumes are October, November, and December, just as the harvesting season comes to an end, at least in the Northern Hemisphere. It somehow overlaps with the peak season in shipping, and I'm guessing that, last year there was a lot of yelling and screaming between the exporters in the United States and the shipping lines or their freight forwarders in order to secure space and container. And let's not forget that's one of the reasons why the US exporters, especially those in the agribusiness, are so pissed off. And now we have the Federal Maritime Commission trying to provide, better support for those exporters, especially those with activity in the agribusiness sector, as I said earlier. Anyhow, that's about it in terms of US export gateways, and I will now move on to my last section related to some statistics about yield, production, and area harvested. Is coming from FAOSTAT, and I've selected here the biggest exporters or producers, which are China, the United States, Mexico, Chile, also the Republic of Moldova, Argentina, and Ukraine. Sadly for China, the figures, especially from 2012 onwards, are all estimations done by FAOSTAT statisticians, so take the numbers with a pinch of salt. But anyways, here, as you can see, I've split the information into 3 tables, and I will start with the first one concerning the area harvested. And we have China, the United States, and Mexico with the biggest harvested area expressed in hectares here. And according to the data, in the last decade, so between 2010 and 2020, the biggest absolute drop in harvested area was in China, who lost about 120,000 hectares. Ukraine lost some 660 hectares, while the biggest increase, again in absolute terms, was in the United States, with some 50,000 more hectares harvested in 2020 than 10 years previously. And the same positive trend goes also for Mexico, Chile, Republic of Moldova, or Argentina, clearly underlining the importance of this crop in the local economy, if you ask me. Guys, I won't cover the production table as there is a positive correlation between the area harvested, the yield, and the production, of course. And instead, I'll focus on the yield here. And it strikes me how Ukraine is having almost twice as much yield per hectare than the United States. For me, it's a little bit strange to say the least. So again, I will use a pinch of salt for the figures concerning Ukraine also, at least for this table regarding yield. Also, again, I'm not an expert here, but if the figures are right, well, I can draw some conclusions, and the first one concerns the United States, Chile, and Mexico, where we see an upward trend with figures both in absolute and relative terms better than in 2020, meaning that the walnut trees are mature and benefit from quality inputs. And I don't know, that the farms are somehow exploited at an industrial scale. While the second conclusion concerns Argentina and the Republic of Moldova, who apparently both seem to have a problem related to lower yields, at least in the last 5 years. But given the fact that the area harvested increased, my only logical explanation, is that the young walnut trees are not yet there in terms of maximum yield. And they will need a couple of years to reach their maximum yield capacity. So I do expect Argentina and the Republic of Moldova to play an important role in the walnuts supply in the next, 5 years. Especially Argentina with its global reach, while, the Republic of Moldova, it's focused more on regional exports like the European Union or Turkey. And guys, with this being said, that's all for today. Thank you all for watching. I really hope that you've liked it. Don't forget to hit those tiny little buttons below this video. And as usual, until next time, keep your business safe. Thanks.